15 American mechanics gave up on the truck. But a Midwestern mechanic surprised everyone. Ashley Johnson never imagined that her hands, calloused from working since childhood, would lead her to a repair shop on the outskirts of Chicago, where 15 veteran mechanics watched her with suspicion mixed with curiosity. The 23-year-old had arrived 3 weeks earlier with a temporary work visa after winning a technical competition sponsored by an American company seeking international talent. It was when she saw the purple truck parked at the back of the shop that she understood why Robert Miller, the owner of Miller's Auto Shop, had accepted her application even against his team's wishes. The vehicle had been there for 6 months, covered by a dusty tarp after all his experienced mechanics declared it a lost cause. "That purple thing over there," said Frank, the head mechanic, pointing dismissively, "has already cost more in repair attempts than it's worth. Robert just won't send it to the junkyard because he's too stubborn to admit defeat." Ashley approached the vehicle, her boots making noise on the concrete floor. She lifted the tarp and her eyes sparkled when she saw the exposed engine. It was a model she knew well, similar to the trucks she fixed with her father at the family shop in Gary. "Can I take a look?" she asked, her words carrying the Midwestern accent she still hadn't gotten used to hiding. "Look all you want," Frank replied with a sarcastic smile. "Just don't break anything that isn't already broken." The other mechanics laughed, but Ashley didn't let it shake her. She had grown up being the only woman in a shop full of men and knew she would need to prove her worth every day. She removed the tarp completely and began examining the engine carefully, touching parts and listening to the sounds they made when pressed. "What do you think it is?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the engine. "Fuel pump problem," answered Dave, a 50-year-old mechanic with graying hair. "We've replaced it 3 times already." "Electrical system," said another. "We rewired the whole thing." "Head gasket," added a third. "New one, too." Ashley nodded, absorbing each piece of information. She knew she was being tested, that every word would be weighed and analyzed by these men who had spent decades building their reputations in that shop. "How many hours have you spent so far?" she asked. 260, Frank replied curtly. "And you, little lady, think you'll fix it in how long?" The question came loaded with irony, but Ashley answered seriously, "I don't know yet. First I need to understand what you've already done." That afternoon, while the others were busy with customers' cars, Ashley remained studying the truck. She didn't touch anything, just observed, took notes, and asked questions when a mechanic passed by. Some answered patiently, others just grumbled and moved on. Robert appeared at the end of the day, a 58-year-old man with a prominent belly and glasses that were always foggy. He had inherited the shop from his father, and although he no longer worked directly on cars, knew every bolt in the place. "How are you adjusting?" he asked in English, the language they used to communicate. "Well, Mr. Miller, thank you for the opportunity." "And what do you think of our purple problem over there?" Ashley looked at the truck and then at Robert. Something in his expression made her realize that vehicle meant more to him than just lost money. "Is it yours?" Robert sighed and nodded. "It was my brother's. He died last year and left this truck to me. Wanted me to sell it, but..." He paused, nervously cleaning his glasses. "It's a rare piece, from 1987. I can't part with it." Ashley understood immediately. It wasn't just a repair, it was an emotional matter. The truck represented memories, family history, perhaps even guilt or regret. "I can try if you allow me. My team has already tried everything." "I know, but maybe a fresh perspective." Robert studied her for a moment. There was something in that Midwestern girl's determination that reminded him of his younger self when he believed no problem was impossible to solve. "All right, but only outside your regular hours. During the day, you help where needed." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. Ashley agreed, and from that night on, began developing a double routine. During the day, she worked as a general assistant, cleaning tools, organizing parts, and helping with simpler tasks. The mechanics treated her with professional courtesy, but there was still a clear barrier between her and them. At night, after everyone left, she returned to study the truck. She brought a worn notebook where she recorded everything. Every part checked, every test previously performed, every theory the mechanics had mentioned during the day. In the first week, she limited herself to observing and documenting. In the second, she began performing some simple tests, always careful not to alter what had already been done. In the third week, a discovery kept her awake until 3 in the morning. The problem wasn't where everyone thought. She had noticed something the experienced mechanics, accustomed to more modern models, hadn't detected. That 1987 truck had a peculiarity in the cooling system that directly affected the fuel supply. It was a design flaw known only to those who had worked with very old models. The next morning, she arrived at the shop earlier than usual, eager to confirm her theory. Frank was already there, preparing the coffee they drank before starting the workday. "You're early today," he commented without much interest. "I have a theory about the truck," said Ashley, trying to control the excitement in her voice. Frank stopped stirring the sugar and looked at her skeptically. "A theory? I think the problem isn't in the parts you replaced. It's in an interaction between systems that only occurs in this specific model." "Interaction between systems," Frank repeated slowly, as if testing the taste of the words. "And you discovered this in 3 weeks? I grew up fixing old trucks in the United States. My father always said that 80s models were finicky, that they had personalities of their own." Frank laughed, but it wasn't a cruel laugh. It was more surprise than disdain. Personalities of their own. Interesting. Other mechanics began arriving, and Frank told them about Ashley's theory. The reactions ranged from polite skepticism to open amusement. Dave, the oldest in the group, was the only one who showed genuine interest. "Explain this interaction," he requested. Ashley took her notebook and began drawing a simple diagram. She showed how the deficient cooling system caused the engine to overheat at specific points, which in turn affected the pressure in the fuel system, creating intermittent failures that simulated problems in various different parts. "That's why you replaced so many parts and the problem persisted," she explained. "Each part was working fine individually, but the system as a whole was unbalanced." Dave studied the diagram carefully. The other mechanics gathered around, some out of curiosity, others out of skepticism. "And how would you fix this?" asked Dave. "First, I'd make a small modification to the cooling system. Nothing that changes the original. Just an adaptation that forces the fluid to circulate better in this area here." She pointed to a specific area of the drawing. "Then I'd adjust the fuel pump calibration to compensate for pressure variations." "That won't work," said Frank categorically. "The cooling system is perfect. We checked everything." "It's perfect for a modern engine," agreed Ashley, "but this engine is 40 years old." The tolerances were different back then. The discussion was interrupted by Robert's arrival, who immediately sensed the tension in the air. "Problem?" he asked. "The Midwesterner thinks she knows what we don't," replied Frank. Robert looked at Ashley, then at the group of mechanics. "And what does she think she knows?" Ashley repeated her explanation, this time more nervous because she was speaking directly with the boss. Robert listened to everything in silence, asking specific questions that demonstrated deep technical knowledge. "Interesting," he said when she finished. "And how long would it take you to test this theory?" "If I can work on the truck during business hours, maybe a week." Frank immediately protested. "Robert, we can't let an intern mess with your truck. If she makes a mistake—" "She'll do it under supervision," decided Robert. "Frank, you supervise. If in a week the theory doesn't prove correct, we go back to how it was before." "And if it works?" asked Ashley. Robert smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "If it works, you get a permanent spot on the team." The auto shop fell silent. Ashley felt the weight of 15 experienced mechanics' stares, some rooting for her, others clearly expecting her to fail. "I accept," she said. For the next 3 days, Ashley worked on the truck under the watchful eyes of Frank and the other mechanics. Every move was analyzed, every decision questioned. She started by carefully disassembling part of the cooling system, exposing connections that hadn't been touched in years. "Why are you removing that?" asked Frank, when she removed a part that seemed perfectly functional. "Because I need to see how the fluid actually circulates, not how it should circulate. she replied, showing rust deposits in spots that should have been clean. It was then that Dave approached and looked at the parts carefully. "I've seen this before," he murmured. "In the military trucks we used to fix in the 90s. They had the same problem." Frank looked surprised. "Why didn't you ever mention it?" "Because I didn't think it was relevant. Those were military vehicles. Very different." "The foundation is the same," explained Ashley. "The forced circulation principle was new in the 80s. Manufacturers were still making many adjustments. On the second day, she began implementing her solution. It was delicate work requiring millimeter precision. One mistake could permanently damage the engine. Kevin Miller, Robert's son, showed up at the auto shop after school. The 16-year-old boy had always been fascinated by engines, but the veteran mechanics treated him like a child, rarely explaining what they were doing. Ashley, noticing his genuine interest, began explaining every step of her work. Kevin absorbed everything enthusiastically, asking smart questions that sometimes even surprised Frank. "Why are you using this tool instead of that one?" asked Kevin, pointing to the set of wrenches Ashley had brought from the United States. "Because this one has a slightly different angle. It allows more precision in this tight space." "Can I try?" Frank immediately protested. "Kevin, you can't mess with your father's truck." "It's all right," said Ashley. "He'll just tighten this bolt here. I'll guide his hand." Robert, who had arrived without anyone noticing, watched his son working under Ashley's guidance. There was something about her patience, the way she explained without condescension, that impressed him. "She's a good teacher," commented Dave, who was also watching the scene. "Yes," agreed Robert. "Maybe that's what this auto shop needs, fresh blood." On the third day, Ashley was ready for the final test. The engine had been reassembled with the proposed modifications, and the entire shop stopped to see if it would work. "Moment of truth," said Frank, trying to sound casual, but clearly nervous. Ashley turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice, and then caught with a smooth, even rumble that made everyone smile involuntarily. "Wait," said Dave, raising his hand. "Let it warm up." The problem always appeared after a few minutes. They all stood around the truck for 15 minutes. The engine kept running perfectly, without the stutters and uneven noises that had characterized it before. "I don't believe it," murmured Frank. Robert got into the cab and drove the truck out of the auto shop, taking it around the block. When he returned, he was smiling broadly. "It's better than new," he announced. "It never ran this well even when it was new." The mechanics applauded, some reluctantly, others with genuine enthusiasm. Ashley felt tears of relief burning her eyes, but she controlled herself. She knew that was just the first battle. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. In the following days, the dynamics of the auto shop changed subtly. Ashley was no longer the Midwestern intern who cleaned tools. She was the mechanic who had solved the problem nobody else could fix, but not everyone was comfortable with this change. Richard Thompson, a 42-year-old mechanic who had worked at the shop for 15 years, began showing open resentment. He had expected to be promoted to assistant manager when Frank retired, and saw Ashley's arrival as a threat to his plans. "It was luck," he commented loudly during lunch. "Anyone would have thought of that solution eventually." "Then why didn't any of us think of it in 6 months?" asked Dave. Richard didn't answer, but his expression made it clear he wasn't finished. Ashley, for her part, was determined to prove that the success with the truck hadn't been a fluke. She began studying other difficult cases at the shop, volunteering to help with the cars that were giving the most trouble. That's when Eleanor Williams's Cadillac arrived. Eleanor was a special customer of the auto shop, widow of an American industrialist. At 72, she still drove her classic 1995 Cadillac every day. The car had priceless sentimental value to her, as it had been a wedding gift from her late husband. The problem was complex. The car had intermittent electrical issues that left Eleanor stranded at unpredictable times. It had already been to 3 Cadillac specialty shops, including the official dealership, without a solution. "It's a lost cause," declared Richard when Robert accepted the job. "Electronic cars from the 90s are a curse. When the electronic control unit starts having problems, There's no fixing it. Ashley overheard the conversation while organizing tools at a nearby workbench. She had worked with similar electronic systems in the United States, mainly on imported cars that arrived with problems not covered by warranty. "Can I take a look?" she asked. Richard laughed sarcastically. "Now you're an expert in American electronics too?" "I'm not an expert in anything," Ashley replied calmly. "But I've seen similar problems before." Frank, who was still getting used to Ashley's new status in the shop, hesitated before answering. "Robert needs to authorize it. It's a very expensive car." Robert arrived at that moment, accompanied by Eleanor Williams. The American lady was elegant even in simplicity, with well-kept grey hair and blue eyes that still shone with intelligence at 72. "Mrs. Williams," said Robert in English, automatically switching to a more respectful tone. "My team will do everything possible." Eleanor replied in English, but then noticed Ashley and switched to English. "Are you the young Midwestern woman who fixed Robert's truck?" "Yes, ma'am. I've heard about your work. Very impressive." Ashley felt the weight of the other mechanics' gazes. Eleanor Williams was a respected figure in the local community, and her praise meant a lot. "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Please call me Eleanor, and tell me, what do you think of my Cadillac?" Ashley looked at Robert, who nodded slightly. "I haven't examined it yet, but from the symptoms I heard, I suspect it's a grounding issue. Cadillacs from that era had grounding points that corroded over time, causing very difficult-to-diagnose intermittent failures." Eleanor looked interested. The other shops talked about replacing the electronic control unit. It would cost over $3,000. "That might be necessary," Ashley said diplomatically, "but it would be good to check the groundings first. It's a test that costs nothing and could solve the problem." Robert decided on the spot. "Ashley, the car is yours, but work with Dave supervising." Richard protested immediately. "Robert, this is a mistake. If she messes it up—" "If I mess it up," Ashley interrupted, "I'll take full responsibility." Eleanor smiled and said to Robert, "I like her confidence. Please, let her try." In the following days, Ashley worked on the Cadillac with systematic methodology. She started by testing each of the vehicle's grounding points, a tedious task that required extreme patience. Dave watched everything with growing interest. At 55, he was the second oldest on the team and had seen many trends and techniques come and go. But Ashley's approach was different. She didn't try to impress with technical knowledge. She simply followed clear logic and tested every possibility methodically. "Why do you test everything twice?" asked Dave. "Because intermittent failures might seem non-existent if you test at the wrong time," she explained. "In the United States, we learn to be suspicious of anything that seems to be working too well." On the second day, Ashley found what she was looking for, a grounding point located near the exhaust that had suffered corrosion due to accumulated heat and moisture over the years. The connection was physically intact, but electrically compromised. "Here," she said, showing Dave a spot that looked perfect at first glance. "Watch when I press it a little." She lightly pressed the connection, and immediately some dashboard lights flickered. "Wow," murmured Dave. "How did you know where to look?" "Experience with old cars in tropical climates," she replied. "Heat and humidity do horrible things to electrical connections." The solution was simple. Thoroughly clean the connection, apply an anti-corrosion product, and slightly reposition the grounding point to a less heat-exposed area. When Eleanor returned to pick up the car, she came with visible skepticism. She had been through many unfulfilled promises before. "Let's test it," she said, starting the engine. The Cadillac ran perfectly. Eleanor drove for 15 minutes, testing all the systems that had given her trouble. Nothing failed. "How much do I owe?" she asked when she returned. Robert glanced at Ashley. $40, she said. "The cost of the part and the anti-corrosion product." $40? Eleanor looked incredulous. The other shops were going to charge over $3,000. The problem wasn't where they thought, Ashley explained simply. Eleanor was silent for a moment, then said to Robert, "This young woman is special. I hope you know that." After Eleanor left, the auto shop fell silent. Ashley had solved in 2 days a problem that specialized auto shops couldn't fix in months. Richard, visibly upset, approached. "You're making all of us look incompetent." "That's not the intention," Ashley replied. "Everyone has different experiences. I just happen to have seen similar problems." "You're 23 years old," said Richard bitterly. "How could you have more experience than us?" The question touched a sensitive spot. Ashley had started working with engines at 12 out of necessity, not as a hobby. She grew up in a family where fixing things wasn't an option, it was survival. "Experience isn't just measured in years," Dave interrupted, breaking the tension. "It's measured in problems solved, and the girl solves problems." Richard left without answering, making it clear that getting along wouldn't be easy. That night, Robert asked Ashley to stay after work. She imagined it would be to discuss her future at the auto shop, but the conversation took an unexpected turn. "My wife wants to meet you," he said. "Your wife?" "Susan. Eleanor Williams told her about the Cadillac. Susan got curious about the young Midwestern girl who's causing such a stir around here." Ashley didn't know how to react. Meeting the boss's family seemed like a big step, but also an added pressure. "It would be an honor," she finally said. "Great. Sunday for lunch. And bring some stories about the United States. Susan loves meeting people from other countries." On Sunday, Ashley went to the Miller's house with a mix of nerves and anticipation. The house was typical American, organized, clean, and comfortable without being showy. Susan Miller was a 55-year-old woman with contagious energy. She had been a teacher before retiring and maintained the intellectual curiosity that characterized good educators. "So you're the famous Midwestern mechanic," said Susan, greeting Ashley with a warm smile. "Robert talks about nothing else." Kevin was also present, clearly excited to have Ashley at home. During lunch, she told stories about her life in the United States, about her father's auto shop, and about the challenges of working with limited resources. "Your father must be very proud," commented Susan. Ashley hesitated. The truth was complicated. Her father had been torn when she decided to go to the United States. On one hand, he was proud of her achievement. On the other, he felt he was losing his most talented helper just when the family auto shop needed it most. "He was worried when I decided to come," she said honestly. "Our auto shop isn't in an easy situation. I helped a lot." "And you don't think about going back?" asked Robert. "I think about it every day," admitted Ashley, "but I also know I need to learn as much as I can here. What I learn from you could help our auto shop in the future." Susan and Robert exchanged a look that Ashley couldn't interpret. "What if there was a way to do both?" asked Susan. "How so?" "Robert has been thinking about expanding the business. Maybe an international partnership." "Susan," Robert gently interrupted her, "let's let Ashley get settled here first." But the seed had been planted. Ashley spent the rest of Sunday thinking about the possibilities a partnership could bring. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. On Monday, Ashley arrived at the auto shop to find a new challenge waiting for her. A delivery truck had arrived overnight with a problem in the brake system that the owner described as dangerous. The driver, a middle-aged man named Carl, was visibly nervous. "The pedal goes all the way to the floor sometimes," he explained. "I almost hit 3 cars yesterday." Frank examined the truck and quickly identified the problem as a faulty master cylinder. It was a standard repair that would take a few hours. 2 hours of labor plus parts, Frank informed Carl. "Perfect. I need the truck by the end of the afternoon." Frank started the work, but after an hour he called Ashley. "There's something odd here. The master cylinder looks new." Ashley examined the part. Frank was right. The cylinder had been replaced recently. "When did you change this?" she asked Carl. "Last week, at Bruno's shop across town." "And the problem continued?" "No, it started again yesterday." Ashley and Frank exchanged looks. A new master cylinder shouldn't fail in a week. "Can I see the invoice for the replacement?" Ashley asked. Carl showed the document. The part was genuine and had been installed by a reputable shop. "Something isn't right," said Ashley. "Frank, can I check the entire system?" Frank nodded, and Ashley began a systematic inspection of the whole brake system. It didn't take long to find the real problem. One of the brake hoses had developed a micro crack inside that caused intermittent pressure loss. That's why the other shop replaced the cylinder, she explained to Frank. The symptom was the same, but the cause was here. How did you see that? Asked Frank, examining the hose that looked perfect on the outside. Learned that in the United States. When you don't have money to replace parts, you learn to investigate thoroughly before spending. Carl was impressed when he learned the real problem would cost only a fraction of what he had spent the previous week. The other shop should have seen this, he said, clearly annoyed. They should have, Ashley agreed diplomatically. But sometimes small problems hide behind big symptoms. The news of Ashley's correct diagnosis spread quickly through the local community. Carl was known in the area as a delivery driver and told the story to everyone who would listen. Within days, new customers began showing up specifically asking for the Midwestern mechanic. Some brought problems that other shops hadn't been able to solve. Others simply wanted a second opinion. Richard observed this change with growing resentment. 20 years working to build a reputation, and a young foreigner was getting all the credit. The situation reached a breaking point when Mr. Anderson's Ford arrived. John Anderson was a long-time customer of the shop, a 70-year-old retiree who cared for his 1992 Ford Focus as if it were a family member. The car had a strange problem. It gradually lost power during long trips but worked perfectly in the city. Richard took the case personally, determined to prove his competence. He spent 2 days testing and adjusting various parts, but the problem persisted. "Let me take a look," Ashley offered on the third day. "Not necessary," Richard replied abruptly. "I know what I'm doing." "Of course you do. I just thought maybe..." "Maybe what? That you know more than I do about American Fords?" Richard's aggressive tone made the whole shop stop to listen. "That's not it," said Ashley calmly. "I just wanted to help." "Your help isn't needed. Fix your own cars and let me fix mine." Frank intervened. "Richard, it doesn't hurt to let her take a look." "Why? Because she got lucky with 2 cars? Because everyone's fawning over the Midwestern princess?" The silence that followed was awkward. Ashley felt her face grow hot, but controlled herself. "Okay," she said. "Sorry to bother you." She returned to the car she was working on, but could feel all the eyes in the shop on her. Richard had crossed a line and everyone knew it. Dave, who had remained neutral in the growing tension until then, approached Richard. "That was unnecessary." "It was honest," Richard retorted. "Someone had to say it." "Say what?" "That you're afraid of a 23-year-old girl." Richard turned red. "Afraid? I've worked here for 20 years. And she's worked here for a month and has already solved more difficult problems than you did last year." The argument was interrupted by the arrival of Robert, who immediately sensed the tension in the air. "Problem?" he asked. "A small professional disagreement," replied Frank diplomatically. Robert looked around, reading everyone's body language. His experience as a manager told him there was more than a small disagreement going on. "I want to see all of you in my office in 5 minutes," he said. The meeting was tense. Robert listened to each version of the facts without interrupting, his glasses fogged up, reflecting the fluorescent light of the small room. "Richard," he finally said, "do you have any problem with Ashley's work?" "I don't have a problem with her work. I have a problem with everyone acting like she's a genius because she fixed 2 cars. 3 cars, corrected Dave, and a truck. Whatever. The point is she's getting special treatment." Robert studied Richard for a moment. "Special treatment like?" "Everyone asks for her opinion. Customers specifically request her. You're letting her work on the most interesting cases." "She's working on the most difficult cases," corrected Robert, "and she's solving them." "By luck." 3 times in a row. Frank shook his head. "Richard, that's not luck. It's competence." Richard stood up abruptly. "Fine. Let her solve everything then. I request a transfer to another shop." "Sit down," said Robert firmly. "No one is being transferred." Richard hesitated, then returned to his chair. "I'll be direct," continued Robert. "Ashley is here because she has talent. That doesn't diminish any of your worth. But I also won't allow professional jealousy to harm the work environment." "It's not jealousy," murmured Richard. "Then what is it?" Richard remained silent for a long moment before answering. I worked 20 years to get where I am. I learned from the best mechanics in the United States, and now you act like some girl who grew up in a backyard garage in the United States knows more than me. The raw honesty of the confession created an uncomfortable silence. Richard, said Ashley softly, I never meant to diminish you or anyone here. You're the best mechanics I've ever known. I just happen to have different experiences. Different experiences, repeated Richard bitterly. Yes. You learned to work with new cars, proper tools, original parts. I learned to work with broken-down cars, improvised tools, adapted parts. They're different ways of looking at the same problems. Dave nodded slowly. She's right. We sometimes look for complex solutions because we're used to complex cars. And I sometimes find simple solutions because I'm used to limited resources, added Ashley. Robert watched the conversation dynamics with interest. Richard, you can learn from Ashley. And Ashley, you can learn from Richard. Everyone can learn from everyone. And if I don't want to learn from her, asked Richard stubbornly. Then you'll fall behind, replied Robert without hesitation, because she'll keep growing and you'll stay stuck. The meeting ended without a clear resolution, but at least the positions were defined. Richard returned to work on Mr. Anderson's Ford, more determined than ever to solve the problem alone. Ashley, in turn, focused on other projects, but couldn't stop thinking about the focus that was giving trouble. There was something familiar about the symptoms described by the client. During lunch, while Friedrich was away, she discreetly approached the Ford. She didn't touch anything, just observed. In 5 minutes, she identified what could be the problem. The fuel filter was located in a position where it could overheat during long trips, causing a gradual restriction in flow. It was a known issue in Focus models from that era, but only in very hot regions or when the cooling system wasn't working perfectly. She returned to her work without mentioning anything to anyone. Late in the afternoon, Friedrich called Werner to explain that he would need more time to solve the Focus's problem. How many hours have you spent already? Werner asked. 15, Friedrich reluctantly admitted. In 3 days. The problem is intermittent, hard to reproduce. Werner sighed. 15 hours on an unresolved issue was a long time, especially considering that Mr. Anderson needed the car for a trip over the weekend. One more day, he decided. If you don't solve it tomorrow, we'll try another approach. That evening, Ashley lay awake wondering whether or not to speak up about her suspicion. On one hand, she wanted to help. On the other, she knew her interference could make the situation with Friedrich even worse. She decided to try an indirect approach. The next morning, while Friedrich was working on the Focus, she struck up a casual conversation with Dave about overheating problems in fuel systems. Dave, have you ever seen issues where the fuel filter overheats? Sure, mostly in older cars in hot countries. And how does it show up? Gradual loss of power as the filter heats up and restricts the flow. Friedrich, who was working nearby, clearly overheard the conversation. Ashley saw out of the corner of her eye when he stopped what he was doing and looked toward the Focus's fuel filter. 15 minutes later, Friedrich had located the exact problem Ashley had identified the day before. It was the filter, he announced to the shop. Bad position, overheated during long trips. Everyone congratulated Friedrich on the discovery, but Ashley noticed that Dave had understood exactly what she had done. The older mechanic gave her a discreet smile and an almost imperceptible wink. Friedrich in turn looked at her with an expression mixing gratitude, irritation, and confusion. He knew she had helped, but in a way that preserved his professional dignity. The repair was quick and Mr. Anderson left satisfied, praising Friedrich's expertise. But when the customer had gone, Friedrich approached Ashley. You knew, didn't you? He asked quietly. Knew what? About the filter. You knew yesterday. Ashley hesitated before answering. Suspected, but suspicion isn't certainty. Why didn't you say anything? Because you said you didn't need my help. Friedrich fell silent for a long moment. Thank you, he finally said. You're welcome. No, seriously. Thank you for not making me look foolish in front of everyone. It was the first genuine gesture Friedrich had made toward Ashley since she arrived. It wasn't friendship, but it was respect. In the following days, the tension in the shop decreased considerably. Friedrich still wasn't warm toward Ashley, but he stopped the sarcastic comments and attempts to belittle her. It was around this time that the challenge arrived, which would test not only Ashley's technical skills, but her leadership ability. A local small business owner named Stephen White brought his fleet of 5 delivery vans with a complex problem. All were experiencing different but related failures that suggested a systematic issue rather than coincidences. "I bought these vans used 6 months ago," Stephen explained. "Same seller, same batch. Now they're all having problems at the same time." Robert examined the documentation. The vans were from different years, but all the same model and manufacturer. The problems ranged from electrical failures to overheating, including transmission issues. "This will be a big job," Robert told Stephen. 5 vans, different problems. "How long?" "With the whole team working, maybe 2 weeks." Stephen looked worried. 2 weeks without the vans will break my company." "I understand, but—" "Can I suggest something?" interrupted Ashley. Robert looked at her curiously. "Of course." "If the problems are related, maybe we should treat them as one single issue instead of 5 separate problems." "Explain further," requested Stephen. "Let me examine all the vans first. If I can identify the pattern, maybe we can solve everything faster." Robert hesitated. It was a big risk to give Ashley responsibility for such an important job. "I would supervise," offered Frank. "And the whole team would help," added Dave. Stephen looked at Robert. "If she can solve it in less time, it's worth trying." Robert made the decision. "All right. Ashley leads the project. Frank supervises. The whole team participates as needed." Richard didn't seem satisfied but didn't protest openly. Ashley spent the first day just examining the 5 vans, noting everything in her notebook and asking Stephen detailed questions about each vehicle's history. "Did they all come from the same seller?" she asked. "Yes, a company vehicle auction." "What kind of company?" "Food delivery. Went bankrupt during the pandemic." Ashley stopped writing. "Food delivery. That explains everything." "Explains what?" asked Frank. "Delivery vans work in a very specific way. Many stops, engine always running at low RPM, electrical system constantly used for refrigeration equipment. It's a usage pattern that wears out specific vehicle parts." So when these parts start failing, they cause a domino effect on other systems. The problems you're seeing aren't coincidence, they're consequence. Over the next 3 days, Ashley coordinated the team in executing her theory. Each mechanic was responsible for specific aspects, but everyone worked following a single plan. "Dave, you handle the electrical systems. Specifically look for overload in the power circuits. Frank, transmissions, but focus on the parts that suffer most from constant stops. Richard, you take refrigeration and air conditioning. These equipment were heavily used. The rest of us will divide engines and suspension." What most impressed the team was how Ashley organized the work. Instead of everyone working in isolation, she created a system where each mechanic's findings informed the other's work. "Found the alternator overloaded in van 3, reported Dave. "Perfect," responded Ashley. "Richard, check if the air conditioning compressor in van 3 is working more than it should. Overloaded alternator might indicate other electrical equipment demanding more power." "Confirmed," said Richard 15 minutes later. "Compressor intermittently locking up." "Frank, this explains the transmission problems you found. Engine working harder to compensate for the bad compressor." It was like assembling a complex puzzle, where each piece revealed the position of other pieces. The team, which had initially been skeptical about working under Ashley's coordination, began to get excited about the systematic approach. By the 4th day, they had identified not just all the problems, but also the order in which they should be solved to maximize efficiency. "We'll fix the alternators and compressors first," Ashley explained to Stephen. "This will relieve the overload on other systems. Then, transmissions and engines. Finally, the fine adjustments." "And how long does that take?" Working in parallel 3 more days, Stephen was impressed. 7 days total instead of 14, if everything goes as planned. And it did. The team worked with a synchronicity that surprised even Robert. Every mechanic knew exactly what to do and when to do it, because everyone understood how their work connected with others. Richard, in particular, seemed to have found a new sense of purpose. Instead of competing with Ashley, he was collaborating with her, discovering that his experience in cooling systems paired perfectly with her knowledge of systemic effects. "I've never worked like this," he commented to Dave during a break. "It's always been everyone in their own corner." "It's different," Dave agreed, "but it's better." On the 7th day, all 5 vans were running perfectly. More than that, they were running better than when Stephen had bought them, because the team had not only fixed the existing issues, but also prevented others that were developing. Stephen was so impressed that he offered the shop a preventive maintenance contract for his entire fleet, including vehicles that didn't even have problems yet. "You didn't just fix them," he told Robert. "You understood." "That's worth a lot." That evening, Robert organized a small celebration at the shop. Nothing fancy, just beer and grilled sausages in the backyard, but it was the first time the whole team had gathered socially since Ashley arrived. "A toast," said Robert, raising his beer, to the team that turned a 2-week job into a 1-week lesson in collaboration. Everyone toasted, but Ashley noticed the toast was less about speed and more about something that had changed in the group's dynamic. "It was the Midwesterner's idea," Richard said unexpectedly. "She deserves the credit." "It was everyone's work," Ashley corrected. "I just organized. You all did the heavy lifting." "Organized well," Richard admitted. "Very well." It was the recognition Ashley had hoped for since she arrived. Not just for her technical skills, but for her ability to work in a team and lead when needed. Dave approached her while the others chatted. "You know what you did here? San organized a repair?" "No. You showed this crew that collaboration works better than competition. That's more valuable than any repair." Ashley looked around at the team that finally seemed relaxed and united. It was true something had changed, but she wasn't sure if it was sustainable. "And now?" she asked. "Now you're officially one of us," Dave replied with a smile. "For better or worse." In the following weeks, Miller's Auto Shop began to gain a different reputation in the area. It wasn't just a competent shop, it was a shop that solved problems others couldn't. Part of that reputation came from Ashley's individual successes, but a growing part came from the collaborative approach she had introduced. The team was working better together, combining experiences and knowledge in a way that multiplied everyone's competence. New challenges came regularly. A local restaurant brought all its refrigerated equipment with similar issues. A small construction company asked for help with a fleet of trucks that was consuming too much fuel. Each project was handled with the same systematic approach: understand the pattern, divide responsibilities, work collaboratively, solve not just the immediate problem, but also its underlying causes. Richard had become one of the biggest advocates of this method, something that even surprised Ashley. "Why did you change your mind?" she asked during a work break. "Because it works," he replied simply. "And because I realized you never tried to belittle me. You tried to include me." "Of course I tried to include you. You have a lot of knowledge. Knowledge that I was keeping just for myself. Now everyone benefits from it, and I benefit from everyone's knowledge." It was a simple philosophy, but one that was transforming not only the shop's efficiency, but also the team's morale. Robert observed these changes with growing satisfaction. His shop was not only more profitable, but also more satisfying to manage. The mechanics were more engaged, the customers more satisfied, and interpersonal problems had practically disappeared. It was in this positive context that the news arrived that would change everything. Kevin rushed into the shop on a Thursday afternoon, carrying an official envelope. "Dad," he shouted, "a letter came from the Mechanics Association." Robert opened the envelope curiously, and his expression gradually changed as he read. "What is it?" asked Frank. "The association wants to conduct an evaluation of the shop," said Robert slowly, "for excellence certification." The shop fell silent. Excellence certification was something few shops managed to obtain. It meant official recognition, more customers, government contracts, prestige. "When?" asked Dave. "Next week." 3 evaluators will spend 2 days here, testing everything. Technical competence, customer service, organization, efficiency. We can do it, said Frank confidently. I don't know, replied Robert, looking worried. The evaluation includes practical test cases. They bring specific problems and time how long it takes us to solve them. What kind of problems? Asked Ashley. We don't know until they arrive. It could be anything. Richard seemed nervous. What if they bring something we've never seen before? Then we improvise, said Dave, like we always have. But Robert still looked worried. There's one thing. The evaluation also includes analysis of customer history. They're going to interview people who brought cars here in the last 6 months. That's good, said Frank. Our customers are satisfied. Most are, agreed Robert. But there's always someone unhappy. And the certification can be denied if there are too many complaints. Ashley noticed that Robert was more nervous than the situation warranted. Is there a specific customer worrying you? Robert hesitated before answering. There's one, Mr. Carpenter. He brought in an old Chrysler 3 months ago. The car had complex problems and we couldn't fix it completely. What happened? He took the car away still having issues and refused to pay. Said he'd sue the shop for incompetence. The team exchanged worried looks. A vocally dissatisfied customer could seriously harm a certification evaluation. Did he sue? Asked Dave. No, but he didn't pay either, and since then he's been spreading negative comments about the shop in the area. What kind of problem did the Chrysler have? Asked Ashley. Intermittent electrical failures. Frank worked on it for 2 weeks. Frank looked uncomfortable. It was a tricky case, heavily modified car, messy electrical system. I managed to fix some issues, but not all. And why didn't you call others to help? Asked Richard. It was before we learned to work as a team, Frank replied honestly. I tried to handle it alone. Ashley had an idea. Where is the car now? Carpenter took it to a Chrysler specialty shop in Chicago. Spent a fortune, but from what I heard, they didn't fix everything either. So it's not just our shop that couldn't do it, said Dave. But if the evaluators interview Carpenter, said Robert, he'll only tell his side of the story and it will sound really bad. The team spent the rest of the afternoon discussing strategies for the evaluation. They reviewed procedures, organized tools, prepared documentation, but everyone knew the ghost of Mr. Carpenter loomed over the process. That night, Ashley couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the Chrysler case, about intermittent electrical problems, about heavily modified cars. There was something familiar in the description that she couldn't identify. The next morning, she arrived at the shop earlier than usual and found Robert already there, clearly having had a bad night's sleep. Mr. Miller. Good morning, Ashley. You're early. I was thinking about the Carpenter case. Robert sighed. Me too. All night. Do you have Frank's notes on what was done to the car? I do. Why? I'd like to take a look. Maybe we can understand what was missed. Robert went to get the folder with the entire case history. Ashley spent an hour studying every note, every test performed, every part replaced. Can I call Mr. Carpenter? She finally asked. Robert looked at her in surprise. What for? To offer a second chance at no cost. Ashley, the man hates this shop. He won't accept. Maybe. But if he accepts and we solve the problem, he can't speak ill of us to the evaluators anymore. And if we don't solve it, then the situation remains as it is now. Robert thought for a moment. It's risky. Everything is risky, but at least it would be an active attempt to solve the problem instead of just waiting for it not to cause damage. Frank arrived at that moment and overheard the conversation. Are you talking about calling Carpenter back? Ashley thinks she can solve the Chrysler problem, explained Robert. Frank looked skeptical. I tried everything I knew. I know, said Ashley diplomatically, but now we have more people thinking about the problem. And sometimes a fresh look. As you always say, Frank completed with a resigned smile. All right, if Robert agrees, I support it. Robert hesitated another moment, then picked up the phone. I'll call him. The conversation was tense. Carpenter clearly wanted nothing to do with Miller's auto shop. But when Robert explained that a new mechanic wanted to try to solve the problem at no cost, the man seemed intrigued. A Midwesterner? Could be heard asking over the phone. Yes, she solved cases others couldn't. There was a long pause. No cost? No cost at all. No cost. If we don't fix it, you lose nothing but time. And if you do fix it? If we fix it, you only pay for the parts that were used. We don't charge for labor. Another pause. All right. But I'll be there supervising everything, and if the girl messes up... She works under full supervision, Robert assured. Carpenter agreed to bring the Chrysler on Monday, one day before the evaluator's arrival. When Robert hung up, the entire shop was silent. Everyone had heard the conversation and understood the pressure Ashley had put on herself. "Are you sure about what you're doing?" asked Dave. "No," Ashley answered honestly, "but it's better to try than to just wait." The weekend passed slowly. Ashley reviewed the Chrysler notes multiple times, researched known issues with the model, talked with Midwestern mechanics via video call to exchange ideas. On Monday morning, Mr. Carpenter arrived driving a black 1995 Chrysler Series 3 that looked impeccable externally. He was a middle-aged man with a perpetually irritated expression and mannerisms that made clear his low expectations about the situation. "So you're the famous Midwestern mechanic," he said, looking Ashley up and down with obvious skepticism. "I'm Ashley Johnson," she replied politely, extending her hand. Carpenter shook her hand without enthusiasm. "Henry Carpenter, and this," he pointed to the Chrysler, "has been my headache for a year. Can you tell me exactly what problems you're having?" "Same as always. Sometimes it won't start. Sometimes it starts but dies halfway. Sometimes the headlights don't work. Sometimes the radio cuts out. No pattern at all." Ashley asked some questions about when the problems had started, whether there was any correlation with weather or temperature, if the car had been modified. "Of course it was modified," Carpenter replied impatiently. "I installed a better sound system, a more modern alarm, xenon lights, things any competent shop should know how to handle." Ashley examined the car externally first, noticing various modifications that had clearly been made over the years by different people with different skill levels. "Can I see the electrical system?" "Sure, but be careful not to make things worse like the other mechanic did." Frank, who was observing the interaction, looked offended but said nothing. Ashley opened the hood and immediately saw the problem. Not the specific problem, but the nature of the problem. The Chrysler's original electrical system had been modified so many times by so many different people that it had become a tangled mess of makeshift connections and questionable adaptations. "Mr. Carpenter," she said after a few minutes, "can I ask a personal question?" "What kind of personal question?" "How much have you spent on modifications to this car over the years?" Carpenter looked uncomfortable. "Does that matter?" "It might matter to understand the problem. Maybe $5,000 over 10 years. "And how many different shops made these modifications?" 4 or 5. "Why?" Ashley pointed to the electrical system. "Because each of those shops made adaptations to the original system differently. Some are incompatible with each other. The result is a system that works most of the time, but has intermittent conflicts that are very difficult to predict or reproduce." "And what's the solution?" "Redo the entire electrical system from scratch, integrating all modifications properly." Carpenter turned pale. "How much does that cost?" "Normally, over $3,000. $3,000? Impossible," I said normally. Ashley continued calmly. But I have a different proposal." "What proposal?" "Let me try a less invasive approach first. Instead of redoing everything, I'll try to identify and isolate only the conflicts that are causing problems. If it works, it costs much less. If it doesn't work, then we consider the complete overhaul." Carpenter looked at Robert. "And this is free?" "If it doesn't fix the problem, yes," Robert confirmed. "If it works, you only pay for the parts used." "How long does it take?" "1 day," said Ashley. "If I can't fix it in 1 day, I'll give up." It was a risky promise, but Ashley was confident in her analysis. She had seen similar systems in the United States, where successive modifications to imported cars created exactly the kind of problem the Chrysler was presenting. "All right," Carpenter said reluctantly, "but I'm staying here to supervise." Ashley spent the next 8 hours methodically mapping every modification made to the Chrysler's electrical system. She used a multimeter to test every connection, every adaptation, every point where new wires had been connected to the original ones. Carpenter watched everything with growing skepticism, especially when Ashley began drawing complex diagrams showing how each modification interacted with the others. "What are you doing?" he asked after a few hours. "Creating a map of how the system actually works," she explained. "Not how it should work according to the manual, but how it functions in reality." "And will that solve anything?" "It will show me where the conflicts are." Around 3 in the afternoon, Ashley had identified 3 specific points where different modifications interfered with each other unpredictably. "Right here," she said, pointing to a connection near the battery. "The new alarm system is sharing a ground with the original ignition system. When the alarm runs certain checks, it interferes with the ignition." "Here," she pointed to another area. "The xenon lights are drawing power from a circuit that also powers the radio. When the lights are at full power, they cause a voltage drop that affects the radio." "And here," she pointed to a third area, "there's an adaptation that sometimes creates a feedback loop that confuses the car's computer." "Does that explain all the problems?" asked Carpenter. "It explains why they're intermittent and unpredictable. Each problem only happens when specific conditions align." The solution Ashley proposed was elegant. Instead of redoing the whole system, she would just add a few strategic connections and insulation to separate the conflicting systems without compromising their functionality. The work was delicate and took another 4 hours. Carpenter watched every step, asking questions that showed limited knowledge but genuine interest. "All set," said Ashley at 7 in the evening. "Let's test it." The testing was exhaustive. They started and turned off the car dozens of times, tested every electrical system in different combinations, tried to recreate the conditions that used to cause problems. Everything worked perfectly. "I can't believe it," murmured Carpenter after half an hour of testing. "It really works." "Seems so," said Ashley, trying not to show the relief she felt. "How much do I owe?" Ashley quickly calculated the cost of the few parts she had used. $60. $60? Carpenter seemed incredulous. "The shop in Chicago charged $800 and didn't fix anything." "They probably tried a different approach," said Ashley diplomatically. Carpenter paid the $60 and stood by the Chrysler for a moment, as if processing what had happened. "Listen," he finally said, I badmouthed this shop to a lot of people." "I understand," replied Robert. "You had reasons to be dissatisfied." "No, I didn't. You all tried to help the best you knew how at the time. I was the one who was unfair." "What matters is that it's fixed now," said Ashley. "Yes, and I'm going to tell the same people I badmouthed that you fixed the problem. I'll make sure to tell them." After Carpenter left, the shop erupted in celebration. Ashley had not only solved a complex technical problem, but also neutralized a significant threat to the certification evaluation. "How did you know you could fix it?" asked Frank. "I didn't," admitted Ashley, "but I knew it was worth trying. And if it hadn't worked, then we would have learned something new." Robert approached with an expression that mixed relief, gratitude, and something else Ashley couldn't identify. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're welcome, Mr. Miller." "No, seriously, thank you for risking your reputation to protect ours." Ashley realized then that her action had been seen not just as solving a technical problem, but as a demonstration of loyalty to the shop and the team. "This shop gave me a chance when I needed it most," she said. "It was the least I could do." The next morning, the 3 evaluators from the Mechanics Association arrived promptly at 8 o'clock. They were middle-aged men with clipboards, stopwatches, and professionally neutral expressions. Robert greeted them with poorly concealed nervousness and introduced the entire team. The evaluators asked questions about each mechanic's qualifications, experience, and specialties. When they got to Ashley, one of the evaluators seemed surprised. "You're Brazilian?" "Yes, sir." "And how long have you been working in the United States?" 3 months. "Interesting. And what's your specialty?" Ashley hesitated. "I wasn't sure if I had developed a specific specialty. Systemic problems, I finally answered. Situations where multiple systems interact unexpectedly. The evaluator jotted something on his clipboard without revealing whether he found the answer satisfactory or not. The first part of the evaluation consisted of inspecting the facilities, tools, safety procedures, and documentation. The shop passed without significant issues. The second part was the practical test cases. The evaluators brought 3 vehicles with specific problems and timed how long the team would take to diagnose and resolve each one. The first case was a simple brake problem that Frank solved in 40 minutes, well within the acceptable time frame. The second case was more complex, an overheating issue that Dave identified as a faulty water pump, solving it in 1 hour and 15 minutes. The third case was specifically assigned to Ashley. "This vehicle," said the lead evaluator, "has symptoms that have confused several shops. We want to see your approach to unconventional problems." It was a Buick A4 that, according to the evaluator, had intermittent power loss with no apparent pattern. 3 shops had already tried to fix it without success. Ashley began with her characteristic approach, detailed questions about history, specific symptoms and usage context. The evaluators responded with limited information, simulating a customer who doesn't know technical details. After examining the car for 15 minutes, Ashley had a suspicion. "Can I test the car under specific conditions?" "What conditions?" "I want to simulate different driving situations to see when the problem manifests." The evaluators agreed, and Ashley spent 40 minutes driving the Buick under different conditions. Sudden acceleration, constant speed, uphill, downhill, tight turns. "Found anything?" asked the evaluator after the tests. "I have a theory. Can I check?" "Proceed." Ashley opened the hood and went straight to the fuel delivery system. After a few tests, she located the problem, a pressure sensor that worked normally under most conditions but failed under specific stress. "It's the fuel rail pressure sensor," she announced. "It works fine under normal conditions, but when the engine demands more fuel quickly, it can't maintain the correct reading. The computer then reduces injection for safety." "Total time?" asked the evaluator, looking at his stopwatch. 1 hour and 20 minutes. Impressive. The other shops took between 4 and 6 hours and still didn't identify the problem correctly. Ashley felt a wave of relief. She had not only solved the problem, but also impressed the evaluators. The third part of the evaluation was the customer interviews. Robert was nervous because he didn't know exactly who the evaluators would speak with, but his concerns proved unfounded. Eleanor Williams was one of the interviewees and praised both the technical work and the shop's service. Stephen White recounted in detail how the team had resolved the problems with his fleet of vans. And, to everyone's surprise, Henry Carpenter was also interviewed. "I had problems with a car that other shops couldn't fix," he told the evaluators. "Miller's Auto Shop not only fixed it, but made a point of calling the customer back to make things right when they realized they could do better. That's professionalism." Robert could hardly believe what he heard. Carpenter had completely transformed his narrative, presenting his experience as a positive example instead of a negative one. The evaluation ended on Wednesday afternoon. The evaluators withdrew, saying the results would be communicated in a week. "How do you think it went?" asked Robert as soon as they stepped out. "I think it went well," Frank replied. "We fixed all the technical issues on time." "The facilities are in order," Dave added, "and the customers spoke highly of us." "Ashley totally nailed the practical test," said Richard. 1 hour and 20 minutes for a problem other shops couldn't fix. That counts for a lot. But Robert still seemed concerned. "Did you see how they were writing everything down? Every detail was being evaluated." "That's normal," Ashley said. "They have to be thorough." The week of waiting was tense. The team tried to work normally, but everyone was anxious about the outcome. The excellent certification would open many doors and bring official recognition for the work they were doing. On Friday, Robert got the call. "Miller's Auto Shop?" he said, answering the phone. "Yes, this is Robert Miller." The whole shop stopped to listen, trying to read Robert's expression as he spoke with the evaluator. "I understand," Robert said. "Yes, thank you very much." When he hung up, he stayed silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. So? Frank asked impatiently. Robert smiled slowly. We did it. Excellence certification approved. The shop erupted in celebration. The mechanics hugged each other. Kevin shouted with joy, and even Richard smiled widely. But there's more, Robert said, raising his hand for quiet. The evaluator said our score was one of the highest they've ever recorded. Why? Dave asked. He said they were impressed not just with individual technical skills, but especially with the team's level of collaboration. He said they rarely see a shop where everyone works so well together. Ashley felt tears burning her eyes. The certification was important, but knowing that her collaborative approach had been officially recognized was even more rewarding. And there's something specific about you, Ashley, Robert continued. About me? The evaluator said your resolution of the Buick problem was exceptional. They want to include the case as an example of excellence in their training materials. Ashley was speechless. Having her work used as an example of excellence by a professional association was more than she had dreamed of when she arrived 3 months earlier. Does that mean anything practical? Richard asked. It means the shop can now compete for government contracts, Robert explained. It means we'll be on the association's recommended shops list. It means more customers, more opportunities, more recognition. And it means all of you are now officially considered excellence certified mechanics, he added, looking at the team. The celebration continued for the rest of the afternoon. Robert closed the shop early and took the whole team to dinner at a nearby restaurant. During the meal, Ashley reflected on the journey she had taken since arriving in the United States. She had left a small shop in Gary as a young mechanic with talent but no formal recognition. Now she was part of a team certified as excellent, with her work being used as an example for other professionals. But more important than the professional recognition was the personal transformation she had experienced. She had learned to work as part of a team in a way she had never experienced before. She had discovered that teaching could be as rewarding as learning. She had proven to herself that she could overcome cultural and language barriers when she had determination and support. "What are you thinking about?" Dave asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about how things have changed," she replied. "For the better? Definitely for the better, but also thinking about what comes next." "What comes next?" Robert asked, who had overheard the conversation. "I don't know yet, but I know I want to keep growing, keep learning, keep contributing." "You can do all that here," said Richard. "The shop needs you." "I know, and I like being here. But I also think about my family in the United States, my dad's auto shop, the things I can bring back." Robert nodded with understanding. "You don't need to decide anything now. You have time to think." "Thank you for everything." "We're the ones who should thank you," said Frank. "You've changed this shop, changed all of us." It was true. In 3 months, Ashley had not only established herself as a competent mechanic, but also catalyzed a transformation in the shop's culture. Internal competition had given way to collaboration. Individualism had been replaced by teamwork. Skepticism toward new ideas had turned into openness to different approaches. But Ashley knew her journey was far from over. The excellence certification was an important milestone, but also a starting point for new challenges and opportunities. In the weeks following the certification, the shop began to reap the practical benefits of the recognition. New customers came specifically because of the certification. Government contracts became available. Miller's Auto Shop's reputation spread beyond the local region. With the increase in work, Robert decided to expand the team. He hired 2 young mechanics and asked Ashley to help train them. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you understand better than anyone how to integrate new people into an existing team," Robert replied. It was a responsibility Ashley took seriously. She remembered how lost and tested she had felt in the early days, and she wanted to ensure the new mechanics had a better experience. The 2 new employees were Marcus, 25 years old, recently graduated from a technical school, and Pam, 28 years old, who was returning to work after a few years caring for her children. Ashley developed an integration program that combined technical training with social integration. Instead of just showing procedures, she explained the reasoning behind each decision. Instead of working in isolation, She made sure Marcus and Pam were included in collaborative projects from day one. "You're good at this," commented Dave, watching Ashley explain a complex procedure to Marcus. "Good at what?" "At teaching, at making people feel like part of the group." It was true. Ashley had discovered she enjoyed teaching almost as much as learning. There was something rewarding about seeing understanding dawn in someone's eyes, about helping a person overcome a challenge, about contributing to someone else's professional growth. Pam, in particular, benefited from Ashley's guidance. As the only other woman in the shop, she faced some of the same challenges Ashley had faced. But with Ashley as a mentor and example, her integration was much smoother. "Thank you for helping me," Pam said after a few weeks. "I know it's not easy being a woman in this environment." "It gets easier when we have support," Ashley replied, "and when we prove our worth every day." "How do you handle the pressure of having to prove more than the men?" "I use it as motivation," Ashley said honestly. "Every time someone doubts me, I work harder to prove them wrong." "Isn't it exhausting?" "Sometimes, but it's also empowering. Every victory means more because it was achieved against low expectations." These conversations with Pam made Ashley reflect on her own journey and how she could use her experience to help other women in the field. It was around this time that an unexpected proposal arrived. Susan Miller showed up at the shop on a Thursday afternoon with an expression that mixed excitement and nervousness. "Ashley," she said, "can I speak with you privately?" They went to Robert's office, which was empty at that moment. "I got an interesting call today," said Susan, "from a friend who works in the city administration." "About what?" "About you. It seems your reputation is spreading beyond the world of auto shops." Ashley didn't understand where the conversation was heading. "The city is planning a technical exchange program with the United States," explained Susan. "They want to send young American professionals to learn American mechanical and maintenance techniques. And they want to bring young Americans to learn American methods. And what does that have to do with me? They want you as the program coordinator, someone who understands both cultures, both technical approaches, and has proven experience in integration and collaboration." Ashley fell silent, processing the proposal. It was an impressive opportunity, but it would also mean leaving the shop just when things were going so well. "It's a 2-year position," continued Susan. "Half the time in the United States, half in the United States. You would work with universities, technical schools, auto shops, government organizations in both countries." "What does Robert think about this?" "I haven't spoken with him yet. I wanted to know first if you would be interested." "I don't know," said Ashley honestly. "It's an amazing opportunity, but you feel loyal to the auto shop?" "Exactly. Robert gave me a chance when no one else would. The team accepted me when I was a stranger. I feel I owe a debt." Susan smiled. "You know what I think Robert would say if he were here?" "What?" "That you don't owe anyone. That you've repaid any favor you received with your work and your contribution. And that an opportunity like this doesn't come along twice in a lifetime." That night, Ashley couldn't sleep. The exchange program proposal resurrected questions she had buried about her future, her ambitions, her family and professional commitments. The next morning, she decided to talk to the people she trusted most at the auto shop. "Dave," she said during a work break, "can I ask for some advice?" "Of course." She told him about the exchange program proposal, about her doubts and internal conflicts. "It's a unique opportunity," said Dave after hearing everything. "You'd be crazy not to seriously consider it." "But the auto shop." "The auto shop will be fine. You taught all of us to work better together. That knowledge won't disappear if you leave. And you all? We'll miss you. But we'll also be proud to say we worked with someone who became an international authority in technical exchange." Ashley had similar conversations with Frank, Richard, and Pam. They all reached the same conclusion. It was an opportunity that couldn't be wasted. The most difficult conversation was with Robert. "Susan told me about the proposal," he said when she asked to speak privately. "And what do you think?" "I think you should accept. Even knowing it means losing a valuable employee." Robert sighed. "Ashley, when you arrived here, I saw potential. but I never imagined that in 3 months you would transform not just your own career, but the entire dynamic of this auto shop. The others contributed too. Of course they did. But you were the catalyst. You showed that there's a better way to work, to solve problems, to treat colleagues. Then why are you encouraging me to leave? Because I recognize talent when I see it. And your talent is too great to be confined to an auto shop, no matter how good it is. Robert paused, nervously cleaning his glasses. Besides, I have a proposal for you. What proposal? How about if Miller's Auto Shop became the official partner of the exchange program? You coordinate the program, but maintain a connection with the auto shop. When you're in the United States, work here part of the time. When you're in the United States, the shop funds some of the exchanges. It was a proposal Ashley hadn't considered, maintaining ties with the shop while expanding her professional horizons. Would that be possible? You'd have to negotiate with the program authorities, but I think they'd be interested in having a certified shop as a practical partner. Ashley felt a wave of relief. Robert's proposal offered the best of both worlds, the opportunity to grow professionally without completely losing the roots she had developed in the United States. Can I think for a few days? Of course, but don't think too long. Opportunities like this have an expiration date. That night, Ashley called her parents in the United States. It was the first time in weeks she had a long conversation with them, and she realized how much she had changed since arriving in the United States. "Honey," her father said after she told him about the proposal, "you've grown so much these past months." "What do you mean?" "When you left, you were a competent mechanic. Now you're talking about international programs, exchanges, partnerships. You've become a complete professional." "And that's good?" "It's great. But it also makes me realize that maybe you've outgrown our small shop." The honesty of the comment touched Ashley deeply. "Dad, I'll never outgrow our shop. It's where I learned everything I know." "You learned the basics there, but you developed much more in the United States, and now you have the chance to combine it all. You don't mind if I stay away longer?" "We mind, of course. We miss you every day, but we also understand you have an opportunity to do something bigger." "And the shop here?" "The shop will be fine. I hired 2 new helpers, and I'm teaching them some of the techniques you showed me on video calls. Who knows, maybe one day they'll have the chance to do an exchange too." Ashley hung up the phone with a feeling of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. She had her family's blessing, the support of her American colleagues, and a proposal that allowed growth without abandoning commitments. The following Monday, she gave her answer. "I accept," she said to Robert and Susan, "on the condition that Miller's Auto Shop becomes an official partner of the program." "Great," said Susan. "I'll call the city administration today." The negotiations took 2 weeks, but the result was even better than Ashley had hoped. Miller's Auto Shop not only became an official partner of the program, but was also designated as a practical training center for all exchange students coming to the region. This meant the shop would host young American mechanics for practical internships while sending American mechanics to the United States. Robert was excited about the prospect of international expansion. "You not only got your dream job," he told Ashley, "but you also opened doors for all of us." Ashley's last month as a regular employee at the shop was bittersweet. On one hand, she was eager to start the new challenge. On the other, she knew she would miss the daily routine, the team camaraderie, the satisfaction of solving concrete mechanical problems. The farewell was organized as a team party in the shop's yard. All the special customers were invited. Eleanor Williams, Stephen White, even Henry Carpenter showed up with a bottle of American wine. "To a toast," said Robert, raising his beer, "to the young American who arrived here with a worn-out notebook and turned all of us into a championship team." "To Ashley," everyone shouted in unison. During the party, Ashley received unexpected gifts. Dave gave her a set of high-quality American tools. Frank presented a technical manual signed by the entire team. Richard, surprisingly, handed you a framed photo of the team working on the 5-van project. "So you remember," he said, "that we're all better when we work together." The most touching gift came from Pam, who had become almost like a younger sister to Ashley. "This is for when you return from the United States," she said, handing over a key. Key to what? To your private bay at the auto shop, explained Robert. Whenever you're in the United States, you have a space here. Ashley felt tears burning her eyes. The key represented more than just a physical space. It meant permanent acceptance, a forever place in a family she had chosen. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you see us from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Ashley made the right decision? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel.